Hi all, I'm going to continue on discussions with Chapter 4, Demanding Ethical and Socially Responsible Behavior. This is an excellent chapter. Basically what we're talking about is the concept of ethics. So one of the things that we talked about in one of the discussion boards was the VW, emissions control. The management class that I teach at DeSales, one of the things that we talk about from a managerial perspective is always one of the business issues that comes up. If you type in the top business issues of 2017, 16, 20, 2015, you'll always get 10, 15 highly newsworthy ethical discussions that come up with regards to bad behavior. It's kind of like the bad boys club of business, whether it's Wells Fargo Bank with its credit card fiasco, or VW with its emission controls, or a baby food manufacturer putting talc or something else into their their powdered formula. It's endless. It's constant. There's never any shortage of material in this line. So I can't stress enough the importance of ethical decision making. And there's a lot of just about every chapter in this book could be blown up not only into a series of classes, but definitely a major. And ethics in business is very important. A lot of folks think that just because something is not illegal, right? That it's okay to do, but that doesn't necessarily hold enough weight for ethical decision making. Sometimes things that are legal are not necessarily the right thing to do. They're just not illegal. So it's a careful consideration to make. If you ever get the opportunity to take an ethical class in ethics, I don't know if DeSales offer them. I can't imagine that they don't. That it's a good idea to take these, because one of the first questions that you'll be asked is, is it against the law in terms of behavior? And if the answer to that question is yes, then don't do it, right? If the answer to the question is it's no, then you have another series of questions to ask yourself, because it still might not be the right thing to do. So just because something is legal doesn't mean it's ethical. So let's just put that out there. It's something to think about that. So, in the last probably 10 years, we've had some financial disasters with regard to you have your Bernie Madoff scheme. Okay, this is the case of somebody who really did behave in a Ponzi scheme structure where he was taking from one group and giving to another. You have done the same type of thing on a highly legal and sanctioned in the terms of the mortgage crisis. Talk about people who didn't necessarily do anything illegal, but in some cases it was, but in other cases they just exploited anything and any legal loophole. That's hard to say, in the system. So if you get a chance to either see the movie The Big Short, I don't know if it got some racier scenes in that, but it is R-rated, I believe, or read the book. It kind of gives you some insights into that. Sometimes these businesses are just a house of cards, and it's frustrating when you're on the receiving end of that, as I was during the mortgage crisis and lost my job because of that. When it comes to being in management and being a business owner, you are the holder of the ethics of a company. Usually, bad behavior, whether it's rationalization, permission, strategy, or whatever the case may be, will set the tone for whether or not bad decisions, unethical behavior is tolerated by your organization. So really what you should have is zero tolerance for unethical behavior. It does nothing. You might have short-term profitability, but in the end, if you have reputation disasters, if you've done harm on the marketplace, and if you have tarnished your your name and your branding, you will absolutely be in a disastrous position. It oftentimes seems that some companies rebound from bad behavior, but it usually costs them so much in terms of money and name and popularity and share, and they just get labeled as not having an ethical background. So it's very important to take it personally and manage businesses with a set of high level standards, and those standards do start with the business owner. So as the entrepreneur or somebody in high level management, it's very important that you you maintain those standards. There's an interesting set of guidelines with regards to codes of ethics and things like that on page 100, how to set ethical standards. We do have processes within organizations, especially corporations, for reporting upwards, and we have the whistleblower concept, which are those folks who decide to basically report unethical and are supposed to be able to do that without retaliation. So I don't know how often that actually happens. Usually what happens in those cases, unfortunately, is that people decide that they're going to be a whistleblower, and a lot of times their job is just put on the chopping block. They might not necessarily get laid off for acts because they spoke up, but there'll be another reason why. So whistleblowers wind up being protected in a lot of ways. And sometimes there's even a monetary reward for those who whistleblow, especially if it's an environmental or something like that where there's whistleblowing. The agencies that protect the environment will have a whistleblower fund so that they can offset legal and loss of income for those folks who do that type of reportability. Now, in terms of where we are right now as a marketplace, a couple of things have been starting to bubble up in terms of corporate responsibility and sustainability. So you'll see a lot of companies out there that have started with some type of social responsibility as their one of their core values. So you have companies like Tom's Shoes, who will give a pair of shoes for every pair of shoes that are purchased. Some things, some people do. I think another one is Warby Parker. They have their eyeglasses. So every pair of eyeglasses that you buy, they will give a pair of eyeglasses to someone in a foreign country, I think, who needs eyeglasses. So there's a lot of corporate philanthropy out there. It's becoming very popular to have organizations give volunteer time to their employees. Some as few hours a year they're able to use some time and be paid for it to do volunteer work. There's companies that will give up to a week that I've heard of for you to do a Habitat for Humanity, or even to do a foreign trip to support a philanthropy activity. Something to think about. If you can't, do that, then many people will write a check, and there's oftentimes the opportunity within organizations to do fundraisers and things like that, and donations. Can of soup for Super Bowl, all kinds of very, very easy and reasonable activities to engage in. So there's sometimes sanctioned charities within an organization, and sometimes they will let you do your own activity, which are great. There's other activities that are also responsibilities to employees, to investors, to customers, and to the society and the environment. In Chapter 4, good reading, one of the things that's an interesting concept here is being responsible to your employees, having a safe workplace. So from an ethical perspective, if you put your employees in danger, if you require them to make unethical decisions, those types of things are very easily preventable and should be done so. In terms of benefits, time off, and those kinds of things. A lot of people are aware of that as an indicator for how socially responsible an organization is. And then the other thing that comes up is sustainability. One of the things that comes up frequently is how green is your organization. So there's a lot of folks out there that are very environmentally concerned, and this all falls under whether a company is ethical or not ethical in its framework. Something to think about. You don't want to be a polluter. You want to have green environment in your office, and that comes down to electrical usage, whether or not your company has monitors on its thermostat controls, if it uses recyclable papers and napkins, and those types of things. So it's a lot to think about, but it's all good stuff. And then across the board, going once again into international ethics. So that's how the chapter wraps up. So, if you're doing the right thing in one country, and just because the standard of living or whatever the case may be is different in a country that you're engaging in, doesn't mean you shouldn't do the right thing there also, even though the guidelines and the laws and the regulations might be different. So make sure you have parity to what you do in the right direction. Anyway, it's a good chapter with a lot of information about ethical behavior. And like I said, ethics or not having ethical behavior winds up being a big issue for a lot of organizations and has been a downfall to many a CIO. So it's a good idea to have a strong framework in that area. Thanks, everybody.